All right, welcome back to the Good Fruit Show, where we're on a mission to discover deep meaning and purpose in our lives. Our guest today is the strong and noble Elliott Hulse. Elliott is a coach who helps men in several areas of life, including creating revenue streams online, getting into exceptional physical shape, and serving as a spiritual mentor to many. His mission is simple yet powerful: making men strong. I first discovered Elliott on YouTube when I was a teenager and quickly became hooked on his content. He wasn't just promoting a product through Strength Camp, it was a way of life. A way of life that I hadn't been exposed to at that age. He inspired me to become strong and fit in a way that truly resonated with me. As the years went on, I checked in on his videos from time to time, keeping up with his story and his progression. Then, when I was 19, I distinctly remember watching one of his videos about men clinging to femininity. The irony was that I was laying on my bed wrapped up in a blanket at the time. At that moment, I knew I needed to change. My life had been unfulfilling up until that point, and I thought, what if old Uncle E is right? Maybe I need to lean into my masculinity and embrace it. So that's what I did. Shortly thereafter, I actually had a dream one night where I made the decision to shave my head. Looking back now at Elliott's influence in my life, it's obvious why my subconscious was leaning in that direction. The next morning, I woke up, grabbed the buzz cutter, and darted outside without a second thought. A few years later, I began exploring Christianity. One thing I knew for certain was that I admired and looked up to Jesus as a role model, but I didn't know what to do next. There were so many questions. What denomination should I try? Should I start going to church? Do I need to go to confession? And so on. Around that same time, Elliott started making videos about his experience in the Catholic Church. Just like when I wanted to get fit at 15 or embrace masculinity at 19, Elliott presented the faith in a way that truly connected with me. But this time, he wasn't the only one I was consulting. I had another mentor, one just as masculine and as mysterious as Elliott. After weeks of prayer and reflection, I decided to become Catholic. Now, from what I've observed about Elliott, he is strong, faithful, gracious, kind, and incredibly grounded. And I just want to take a moment to express my gratitude for all the time and energy you've poured into helping men become strong. You've had a positive impact on my life and countless others, so thank you. With that being said, Elliott, welcome to the show.
Praise the Lord. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm very excited to dive in. I know quite a bit about you because, like I said, I've been following your story for quite some time, but, just getting to know your childhood and some of the early years of your life and kind of what formed you into who you are. I'm very excited to dive in. So we'll start off with some like warm-up questions. When were you born?
I was born April 10th, 1979.
So how old does that make you today?
46.
And who are your parents?
My father is Edmund Ignatius Hulse from Belize to Brooklyn. And my mom is Deborah Marcella Hulse, maiden name Gutierrez from Belize to Brooklyn.
So what was your dad like growing up, like when you were really young?
Hardworking, engaged, and tough. Yeah, he was there a lot, and we didn't always want him there because he was tough. And so, unlike a lot of my friends' parents that I like to say were fat and funny, my dad was lean and mean. And so, as a kid, it was he was intimidating to us, and to he was never abusive, but he was tough. And I resented that as a teenager because he and I would bump heads a lot. But then I learned to appreciate it when I had my own kids, and now I admire him tremendously.
What about your mom? What was she like?
My mom was hardworking, generous, and tough. She's tough too. She's physically tough, mentally tough. She worked emotionally tough. She was a hospice nurse for children at a children's hospital. So she literally helped children die. That was like her job. She helped children die. All the children that came to her unit were there because they were going to die. And so she was emotionally tough enough to handle that, although she'd come home crying sometimes. But she was definitely loving, caring, and the best nurse that they've ever had. She would go out of her way to make the children's lives easier uh, on their way to death.
Do you have any siblings?
Yes, I got two younger brothers and a younger sister.
And what are their names and what are they like, or what were they like?
Well, I got my brother Eric, and Eric and I fought a lot when we were young, and we were really different. And it turns out he was homosexual. When he was like being pushed around in the stroller, he wanted to play with dolls. When we would buy ask Santa Claus for Christmas presents, he wanted My Little Ponies, and me and my other brother wanted Transformers. So we love each other. I love my brother. We were just always very different. Where me and my younger brother were into football and fighting. Um, Eric was into music and gay stuff.
So who else is there? There's Eric, and then
And then there's Ellis. And Ellis was emotional and angry and got into a lot of fights with my dad and got a lot of fights in school. Um, Tough, but also lazy. I'm spilling all my family's guts. But yeah, and he and I got along a little bit better because we worked out together, we played football together, and we played video games together. And I love him just like I love Eric, and I love them equally.
where did you grow up?
Well, I was the oldest, and my sister it was the youngest. So I was the oldest in that order, and Stacy was the fourth, and she was the youngest. She was the only girl, and she was tough, and she still is tough. And I just remember we treated her like one of the boys, and it probably traumatized her. We would like beat her up and tease her. It was all three of us were like really tough on her, and so she grew up to be pretty tough. So
No, like location wise, where did you guys grow up? In Florida
we
or
grew up on
Long
Long Island, New
Island?
York, Baldwin, New York.
And then I know your dad isn't from the US, that's correct, right?
Both of my parents are from Belize, small
From
country in
Belize.
Central America, English speaking country in Latin America. Yep.
Do you know when they came to the US?
1970s, early 1970s. Came from, like I said, from Belize to Brooklyn. So that was like where the immigrant community would congregate. So it was them and a lot of other, people who migrated, came to the U.S. from Central America.
So it was a few years before you were born, it sounds like.
Yeah, they came here separately, but they married. Met each other here and married.
Hmm.
My dad's brother ended up marrying my mom's aunt, so they were like related in a kind of way, not really related, but like that's how they met each other. My dad's my uncle and my mom's aunt, so my second aunt. They were together, and then my dad would come over and hang out with his brother at her house, and that's where he and my mom met.
Now, do you know much more about your parents' story, like before you were born? Kind of like where were they at in their life when you were born, or just a few moments prior?
Like right before I was born, what things were like.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, they're They're from Belize, but they became Americanized really quickly. My mom went to nursing school. She was probably right out of nursing school, or like I think maybe either still in nursing school or right out of nursing school, doing her first job. My dad was probably working as a mechanic. He did auto body most of my life growing up, and my dad was kind of a playboy, and my mom was like a goody goody. And so they were complete opposites. And my mom's family, even my dad's family, they were like, "Don't marry Edmund. He's bad news." He smoked a lot, drank a lot. He was, he was a tough guy, 1970s tough guy, right? And worked on cars. So they weren't supposed to make it for all intents and purposes because, they were supposedly incompatible. But it's interesting because out of all 10 of my father's siblings and my mom and her siblings, they're the only ones. They're like literally the only ones in my extended family that remain together to this day.
Wow, so you had a lot of aunts and uncles too.
Lots of aunts and uncles and lots of cousins.
And did they move to the U.S. or are a lot of them in Belize?
Everybody was in the US by the time I was born. My grandparents and all my aunts and most of my aunts and uncles, like 90% of them. A few of them got deported for doing bad stuff. But for the most part, they were all here.
So, kind of diving into your story now, did your parents tell you much about what you were like when you were a baby?
When I was a baby,
Like
I,
newborn?
yeah, a little bit. I do remember that my mom telling me that I was like, I cried a lot, like ferocious crying, like terrible, like ah! And it was apparently I had like really bad gas pains or something, and as a result, like it drove my mom nuts, and I just like cried all the time, and I cried so hard that I bursted my I gave myself a hernia as a baby because the
Oh,
pressure I built up so much pressure on the inside. So it's funny because when my mom was pregnant with me, my mom always had like really bad asthma and allergies. So she would take steroids. She would take like, prednisone and stuff like that. Like, and she's already pretty tough. And the joke is that like because she took so much steroids when she was pregnant with me, that like that's how I ended up being so strong. That I cry so loud that I burst my own insides.
that's a fascinating story. Um, and then what? So one of the things we explore on the show is like, what are your earliest memories? Is there any that come to mind?
Yes, yeah, and strangely enough, they're all crying. I remember crying when my mom was in the hospital giving birth to my brother. So I remember my dad took me there to visit my mom because she was going to have the baby, and then it was time for me to leave, but she wasn't coming home. I'm like, what are you like? Why are you not coming home? And so I remember crying hysterically. I remember being really young in the living room one day, just playing by myself. And I don't know why, but I made myself cry. I was like, I'm gonna cry. I'm just gonna make myself cry. So I started crying. And I also remember my first day of kindergarten and crying. And I remember coming home, walking home after, my on my own one day from school, and nobody was home. I was ringing the doorbell and I was crying. I was scared. So a lot of my earliest memories of me crying.
And your brother, how far apart are you?
2 years ish, about 2 years.
Wow, so you were really young with that memory
Mm-hmm.
of your brother being born. That's pretty
Mm-hmm.
cool. Did you go to 4K too? Do you know?
4K?
Yeah, like pre-kindergarten.
Oh, yeah, I went to preschool. I do have some memories from preschool too.
Yeah. Do any of them stick out to you from preschool?
Yeah, so a couple things stick out to me. I remember I remember snack time one day, they gave us Munster cheese. Munster cheese. It was like, and Munster cheese doesn't taste like good for a kid, and it sounded like monster. And I was so pissed off. I was like, why are they giving me this monster cheese? It tastes terrible, and it's like for monsters. I remember we used to make stone soup. Like I don't know why they call it stone soup, but it was a kind of soup that we would make all the time, and that was like once a year. And so I remember that we would make stone soup, and that would be the day that we ate stone soup. And I remember my first crush. It was in kindergarten, and her name was Hillary, and she was a cousin of a boy that became my best friend. We were all in the same class, and so it was David who became my best friend, who looks a lot like you actually, and his cousin Hillary, who had blonde hair. And I'm in kindergarten. I don't know how much television or media I consumed at that time to know, but I knew I loved her. And one day she was like, I don't know what we were doing as kids, but she was like pointing her finger, like scolding me. Like, I don't know if it was a game or something, but she was like scolding me. And as she was like getting close to scold me, I was like, this is my chance. And I kissed her. I just blew a kiss. I went like this. And then you disappeared. But it was when I
Seriously?
when I first, yeah. As soon I was telling the story about how she was pointing her finger and like scolding me or pretending to be a mom or something like that, and I knew that she was getting closer. It was my chance, and so I kissed her. I kissed her right on her lips. But that's when you disappeared.
That's very apropos. All right. So you had your first crush, and you were telling me about your first interactions with her.
Hmm. I also remember driving a car for the first time in preschool. One of my friends' dads came to pick us up because we would carpool, and he would let us sit on his lap while he drove. But like we thought we were driving, so I remember right before we got to our houses, he would say, "All right, it's your turn. Drive up to your house," and he let me drive.
And then you had mentioned media. And so do you remember any of the TV shows that you watched when you were young?
I remember Sesame Street. I remember Romper Room with Miss Molly. I remember Mr. Rogers.
Which of those
Those,
shows was
yeah.
your favorite?
I would have to say Sesame Street. Sesame Street was probably my favorite show then.
Why do you suppose that was?
The big colorful creatures. How could you, it was like before AI and like the cool cartoons they have now. They're like really flashy and like draw you in. They're like super hypnotic. So it was hypnotic to like see puppet creatures, right? We had cartoons too, but I liked Oscar. I like Oscar the Grouch. He was my favorite. I don't know why. Who would like Oscar the Grouch? But he was a grouch and he lived in a garbage can. And I just loved that guy. And so I would pretend that I live in a garbage can sometimes. I like to get in the garbage can. I would like dump garbage all over the playroom floor and roll around it like I was Oscar the Grouch because I was in the garbage. And in fact, I think part of the reason why I think I like garbage and Oscar the Grouch was because I have a memory of being young and the garbage men coming. And this was way back before like they had the machines to pick up the garbage. The guys would they it was like the coolest thing ever. I also remember watching Dukes of Hazzard because the garbage men remind me of Dukes of Hazzard guys. So I'd be sitting there, I'd be laying there looking out my front front window, front door, and here would come the big truck. And these dudes with like cut off sleeves and bandanas, like they were a gang, would jump off the back of the truck, grab all the garbage and throw it in. They just looked so strong and so awesome. They were like a garbage gang. And so I like aspired. I remember thinking like that's what I want to do one day. I want to be a garbage man because these guys are awesome.
That's an awesome story, man. Um, and then do you remember like what you guys used to eat when you were really young, like as a family?
When I was really young, my aunt lived with us. Well, most of my life, actually my whole life, my aunt lived with us. My dad's aunt. We called her Auntie. And Auntie was like, she was tough, if you could tell, like from a line of tough people. Um, but she was also very talented. She was a seamstress, and she was also a cook, like gourmet level cook, like a chef. Um, no formal training, but like she could cook really well from Belize. So I grew up eating like coconut rice and stewed chicken and stewed fish. She would fry her own chicken. She would make things like fried jacks and Johnny cakes and powder buns and like all these strange like English because uh, Belize was English, so a lot of English foods, and it was amazing. It was great. I mean, the food tastes incredible, and like whenever friends would come over to eat, they were like just mind was blown. Like first of all, like somebody cooked this because most of them came from families where it was like microwave, and and not only that, it just tasted incredible. So I grew up eating like really well.
So you had a pretty like healthy upbringing, which is really cool. Kind of like established that strong sense of like health, physical health within you when you were really young.
Yeah, health was important to my whole family. My uncle was a martial artist. He was a kung fu. He did Northern Shaolin Kung Fu. He was a gymnast. He ran marathons and he did bodybuilding. And I remember like being a kid in the basement and he would like he taught me and my brothers how to work out. We're like 4 years old and we're doing push-ups, doing pull-ups and climbing the rope and kicking the bag. So he used to do backflips. So he was like literally like a superhero. My mom's brother, he would just do standing backflips. We'd just be like hanging out, or like friends would be over, and Uncle Elroy would just do a backflip, just standing backflip. Or he had like bricks in the basement that he would chop. He'd like stack up the bricks, and he would like do a kung fu chop and break the break the bricks. And my mom also was health conscious, so I remember being a kid and drinking cod liver oil. Like now it's like a big thing and it's like, oh, fish oils are good for your brain and stuff. We used to use coconut oil and cod liver oil back when it was like nobody even heard of it. And it was actually by the time I was like, I don't know, like in middle school or like, sixth grade, like the science came out that saturated fats are bad for you. And my mom stopped giving us those things because she was like, "Oh, we grew up with coconut oil and cod liver oil, but they're fat, and you shouldn't have fat anymore." So they got duped, and now like everybody figured it out later on. So
Do you remember who your kindergarten teacher was or teachers?
yeah, Miss Silverstein.
What was she like? Do you remember?
I don't remember much about her. I remember what she looked like. She had big hair. She was a big woman, not like fat, but she was like tall. She was just like a hefty woman. Um, and I don't remember much about her, but my mom does. My mom always says Miss Silverstein would report, the teacher's report. And the report that Miss Silverstein, my mom reminds me to this day, she has to remind me, the report that Miss Silverstein gave about me was that I didn't want to engage with the activities because I'd rather look out the window. And that was somehow perplexing to her and like upsetting to my mother. And Miss Silverstein said he'd rather watch the guys mowing the lawn. Like I watched the guys mowing because it was once again like a man on a machine making noise and doing shit. So I guess I was just more entranced by what was going on outside than like, what the hell is the he was talking about in the classroom. So that was the first pre-diagnosis of me having ADHD, they said later on.
It sounds like you were just like a young boy who was really interested in masculinity, even at the time.
Yeah, I mean, this is like in the early 1980s, 1982 or something, 1983. So they were out there trying to squash us then.
That's so cool, though, man. Just kind of exploring your roots a little bit. It goes back pretty deep.
Mhm.
So, kind of moving into like first, second, third grade. Those years. Was your was your upbringing pretty consistent in terms of like physical health? Were you doing a lot of activities and things like that with your uncle? And
Yeah, it continued. Physical activity. I was in PE. We used to call it gym class. Now they call it PE, physical education. But of course, gym and recess were my favorite classes. And I remember being like the only one that could do pull-ups. Or I not the only one, but like I always did the most pull-ups. I always did the most push-ups. And I was always the fastest. And I was strong and I was rough. So I hurt a lot of kids. Like we'd play like, catch the man with the ball. We called it rugby. And I'd like run them over to the point where it was no longer fun playing with me because I would just run. And if anybody got in my way, I'd just run them over. And so all the kids would just get out the way. It was like, oh, it's no fair if Elliott's playing because no one's going to try to tackle him or take him down.
you remember any of the other games they used to play in PE?
I was never good at the games that didn't require brute force. So like dribbling a basketball, I didn't do so well. I remember even in basketball, my parents put me in like basketball league, because the other kids, my friends were there, and I would foul out of every game. First half, I fouled out of every game, and I could not figure out why. I'm like, okay, I'm supposed to get that ball away from him and stop him from putting it in the. So like I'm trying to do what they tell me to do, but it's like, no, you can't do it that way. And so that didn't last very very long. I did gymnastics, and I remember gymnastics. Um, Once again, like they were in awe, like the gymnastics teachers, coaches, or whatever. They were in awe because I could do a jumping split. Like I could jump up and touch my toes as a kid. And I learned that from my uncle. And I could do like whatever we did, I was like the best one. And they thought I was gonna be like, they were like salivating over me. They thought I was gonna be like the next gymnast. But I quit. I quit because my friends quit. They quit. So I was like, I'm only there because they wanted to do it. And so my parents are like, they didn't force me. They're like, all right, fine, quit. Baseball, I could never make the bat hit the ball. I remember my mom would remind me once again that like the coaches were perplexed that when I was out in the field, I was not paying attention to what was happening at bat. So they put me out in left field because I wasn't paying attention. And like I'd be watching what's going on somewhere else, or I'd be playing with the grass, and then the ball would come to me, and like I didn't even like go to the ball because it's like what's going on? I totally checked out a long time ago, right? So baseball wasn't my thing, and it wasn't until because I played that schoolyard rugby that I know I could take a ball and I could like I would hurt children, and I don't say that nicely. I'm like, because a lot of them went home with like injuries, but like then my cousin came to live with us when he was in high school, and he started playing football, and I fell in love. I didn't know anything about football. My parents were from Belize, so they knew soccer, they knew cricket, right? These English sports, but like I never even seen football on a television show. And then my cousin came over and he was into it, and he would like wear this shiny helmet, and like all the boys would come out, they come running out, and they tear the banner, and the band was playing, and the crowd is cheering, and then they would go and smash heads with each other and run and chase each other down. And I was like, this is it. I'm born for this. And so that was my sport. And I started that in sixth grade, and I excelled immediately. I mean, I was very young. I was brought up to the varsity team. I was captain, my most of high school. Uh, yeah, that was my sport.
So kind of going back in time again, back to like first, second, third. Um, so at that time, that's when you were doing like gymnastics, and you also mentioned the baseball, but you were kind of focused on what was going on elsewhere. Were you?
Mhm.
Do you remember dreaming a lot when you were a kid, like at night, having pretty vivid dreams?
I I don't. I know I did have dreams, but I don't remember having lots of them or remembering any of them. I have more dreams now. I have dreams almost every night, wild, vivid dreams these days. But I don't remember them so much as when I was a kid.
And then in terms of like spirituality, was your family religious at all? Were they into any uh, types of practices like that?
So they were culturally Catholic, you could say. Like we were baptized and received all of our sacraments because like that's what you do. So my from apparently on my mom's side, her mom was really religious, and then her grandmother was really religious, and her aunts, one of her last surviving aunts, who was I was so grateful for her to be alive when I reverted. She was a nun, but my mom, she never really carried on the faith. She just did what she thought she was supposed to do by getting us the sacraments. And my dad never really into it at all. He thinks it's silly. He's not into it, but he's very spiritual. When I say that, I mean like he believes in God. He calls God the Almighty Man. The Almighty Man, the Almighty Man, the Almighty Man's in charge. The Almighty Man knows. So like he's into God. He believes in God. He is very faithful to God. Like he can't understand Christians that are afraid of anything. He's like, if you are afraid, you don't have faith. And if you don't have faith, you don't believe in your Jesus. So he calls out religious people for not being faithful enough, but he's very courageous. He's very faithful, but not religious at all. Neither of them.
Do you remember having like any religious kind of orientation? Like, were you thinking about God at that time, or was it kind of more like you're thinking about sports and, uh, you're a very physical person. So was your mind kind of oriented towards those things?
No, not at all. I mean, I listened to the lessons and I prayed every night, but it wasn't like I knew what I was doing. I was just repeating the words. I would say the Our Father, right? So I know the Our Father, and that was it. And I did it every night because I was supposed to, right? So I was just following the rules, and I knew the stories because when we went to CCD, which was what they would call it, catechesis. They taught us all the stories, but like I didn't relate to them or care anything about them. And it wasn't until maybe around fifth grade, fifth or sixth grade, that I started exploring the existential. Like I was drawn to spirituality very young. I didn't understand what they were trying to teach me with Christianity. I just didn't get it, and my parents didn't really care. But because I'm of mixed race, I don't look, I'm not black, but I'm not white. I got blue eyes, but I got big lips. So growing up, I got asked all the time, like, "What are you?" I look Puerto Rican, but I don't speak Spanish. So I always had Spanish people like yapping at me. I'm like, no blah. And so like I didn't really fit in anywhere. So I was always asked the question, Elliot, what are you? What are you? And I never had an answer. And the other kids had an answer. I didn't have an answer. I was like, what do you mean? Like, I am me. But they wanted me to answer them with like a racial question. Like, what are you? What are you? Black? Are you? Why are you Puerto Rican? What are you? So that was like a question that was imprinted on my heart very young because I don't want to say I was traumatized by it, but I was like, I'm different. I got to figure this thing out because like if everybody knows what they are and I don't, that's that's quite a disadvantage. And I even would like I remember my like it was my fourth grade teacher asked me in front of the class, and I was like, well, my parents are from Belize. That was my answer. I was like, I don't know what I am, but I know I'm Belizean, and my parents are from Belize, and Belize is a country that was very mixed. And even that answer wasn't good enough. I remember the teacher told me that there's no such place as Belize. Here I'm like, oh my God, like my parents have been lying to me all this time. I don't know what I am. And my teacher just told me that there's no such place as where I thought we came from. Like I must be from out of this world. I have no clue what's going on. And so I remember being in the library probably around fifth or sixth grade, and I stumbled upon, I was not there for books. I think I was there meeting girls or something. And I was walking around upstairs in the philosophy section, and I found the book by, I think it was Apollo May or Rollo May, called "What Are You Really? What are you? Like who are you?" Something like that, right? It was like, "Who are you?" It was the question that I always was asked. I was like, "Who am I really?" Wow. So I pull out this philosophy book, and I'm introduced to quantum physics and like Eastern spirituality all in at one time, and my mind is blown. And so at this point, I'm like, okay, none of us know who we are because it has nothing to do with any of this shit. It's something else. It's out of this. It really is out of this world. And that cracked open my religious sentiment.
And that was in what grade? You said fourth grade?
No, closer to like fifth or sixth grade.
Still, like you're having kind of an existential crisis at fifth and sixth grade.
Yeah.
And so you found that book in the library and you read through it pretty vividly.
I don't remember reading through all of it. I probably didn't check it out. I think I may have just like skimmed, like looked through it and read pages. I know I sat down. I know I sat down and just I probably spent maybe an hour there with it. And it was just like page after page of just like weird stuff, but I was picking up on it. There was that book, and then The Seed of the Soul. Well, I can't remember the author of that, but it was that book, and then like I picked up another one, and it was between those two books that I was like, okay, this is a bigger game than I thought it was.
Wow. That's pretty remarkable, just coming from a young age like that, diving into those questions. So, kind of going back first, second, third, do you remember your teachers in those grades?
Yeah, Miss Walensky was my first grade teacher. Miss Lambright was my second grade teacher. Miss Hadley was my third grade teacher.
Do any of them stick out to you?
Miss Walensky was mean. She would come around and peck my head with a pencil if I was doing what I was doing wrong. I remember that. I'll never forget that about Miss Walensky. Miss Lambright had the strangest blinking problem. And especially when she would like scold us, she would get right into our face and be like, "Mr. Hulse." I was like, why is she doing that? That was Miss Lambright. And then Miss Hadley was strange. She's like a Nephilim. She was super tall, had a raspy voice, and would smoke cigarettes. And her breath always smelled. She would get close, and her breath would smell like coffee, and her teeth were stained.
And then in terms of like being a student, I know you said that you spent a lot of time like looking out the window, looking at the guy mowing lawn or like, just kind of drifting off in class. Do you remember anything else about like what kind of a student you were? Like, besides those moments, were you pretty attentive or, were you pretty checked out? Like, how did that look?
Um, I was a s- C minus student at best. Most of my papers came back with red letters and lots of red markings all over it. Not a very good student. Never did well on tests. Um, my teachers asserted that I was capable but unwilling. And so they reluctantly put me in remedial classes, like a remedial class. And I remember going into the remedial class and I'm like, I don't I don't belong here. I didn't belong here because the kids that were there they were actually remedial. Like some of them like had speech impediments and like I wasn't like them, but I did not do well in school. I had no reason to want to pass these tests. Like I just didn't care.
You think it was because you just didn't really have any interest? Like there was other things like kind of captivating your attention?
Yeah, it was it. So one thing that I know about myself is that interest is more prominent than importance. And no one could make me feel like what we were doing was important. Like I remember when we did like the standardized tests and it was like the teachers were like really building this up. These are very important. They're going to go with you forever. This is like the fate of your life. And I'm like, ah, like that didn't mean anything to me. I was like, what are you talking about? And so I remember just bubbling in whatever. Like, okay, this is not interesting at all. But if there was something that I was interested in, even to this day, if I'm something that I'm interested in, I go down the rabbit hole and I become the expert on it. Like I don't have a learning disability. I just have a lack of interest in most shit or stuff. Sorry.
So what was important to you in those early years? Like was there stuff that your parents kind of ingrained into you that, family's important, friends are important, like things like that or, what did you really value at that age?
Phys ed, um, recess, lunch, girls. I liked girls very early on. And working out. I had a little dumbbell and I had like little weights at my house. And I remember working out. My uncle taught me when I was young, but I always kind of like kept up doing it. Playing with my friends, like going home, like all I cared about was like when the school bell rang. And then I could get the hell out of there and go play with my friends.
So do you remember like what you guys had for lunch in school? Like did your mom pack a lunch? Did you eat the school lunch?
No, we didn't have school lunches back then. Our parents would send us to school with lunch, and then like I think once a month we had like pizza day. But it was yeah, my mom would pack sandwiches, bologna sandwiches, spam sandwiches, ham sandwiches. I remember there was this one kid. So I grew a little bit faster. I had more muscle. I was a little bit stronger than most of the other kids. And there's one kid he was really paltry and pale, like a weak little guy. But I liked him. We were friends, and I really liked him because I caught him one day throwing his tuna sandwich in the garbage. I was like, what are you doing?" And he was like, "I don't like these." I was like, "For now on, you bring those to me before you throw them away." And he was like, "Great." So he and I became really, really good friends because he would give me his sandwiches. I was not a bully. I didn't take his sandwiches. He just didn't want them and he was throwing them in the garbage. I was like, you can't do that. So he gave me his sandwiches and then we became friends. And I remember going to his house one day and like, playing. and his parents were just in awe of me because I had so much energy. I remember like kicking the ball and it went over the fence, and his dad was like, "Who is this kid? Why?" He's like, so much. He's so energetic, and I didn't think much of it because I was like, everybody at my house, like this is what it's like at my house. But because he was like an only child and he was really like weak and feeble, his parents were like, "This is incredible. Who is this kid?" So they loved me too.
You said you were energetic. Do you remember if you were pretty social as a kid?
Yeah, I was very social in a way that was disturbing to the class. So I made a lot of jokes. I was a jokester. I would make a lot of jokes. I would speak out in class. I would just kind of like do whatever I wanted sometimes. This is what made them, very upset. It was like, okay, Elliot doesn't do well in his tests, but he's disturbing the other other children. I had a good sense of humor, and so like when the teacher says, so one kid who was my best friend, he remembers. He told me this the other day. I didn't remember this. He told me this because we reconnected through Instagram, and we were like sharing childhood memories. And he's like, I remember that we had like an assembly, a school assembly, like the whole school gets together, and it's a very important thing. And we do the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. And we do the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. And at the end of the Pledge of Allegiance, I just yell out, "Play ball!" And everybody just died laughing because, I used to go to Mets games, and then most of them knew what I was talking about. And it was, I don't know, it wasn't that funny, but it was impulsive. So I was just like, "Play ball." And I got in big trouble. That was the kind of thing I would do. I would just yell out.
So you were a jokester, and then did you pretty much like socialize with everyone? Like all different types of kids, athletes, smart kids.
Well, if we're still in elementary school, like everybody's the same pretty much. So yeah, we all played with each other, boys, girls, black, white, like we just all played together. And with boys, it's like the hierarchy begins in the playground. So it's like, who's the fastest, who's the strongest, and then it's pecking order from there. That's just natural.
Yeah, very
So we
true.
knew who was who. Yeah.
And then moving into fourth, fifth, and sixth grade now, um, you got these questions of who am I? You're reading philosophy books already. Do you remember what teachers you had in fourth and fifth, sixth grade?
Yeah, Miss Siegel. And Miss Siegel was the teacher that it was under her tutelage that I was sent to the school psychiatrist, and that led down the rabbit hole to Ritalin. And so fourth, fifth, and sixth grade was marred by a duality between me sitting down, shutting up, and actually passing some tests, and spitting out the medicine when my friends provoked me to, and being worse than even ever. So there was like this pendulum swing where I was like, when I took the pills, I was quiet, and I even got like praise. Look at how good Elliot is, and look at his test, and look at what happens. And it was like, wow, for the first time, I was like, I'm getting praise for something good. But then, like, the other kids, the friends, like the other boys were like, "You're not fun anymore, Elliot." I remember the boys saying, like, we need the real Elliot to come out. And they conspired, and they're like, when they give you the pill, just spit it out. I'm like, huh, all right. And so that gave me like an identity that like allowed me to like really play up being disruptive, because I was labeled as disruptive, and I was medicated as a result, and I spit out the medication. So it was like I allowed like an alter ego to come out. I was worse than ever. So there was a lot of swinging in those 3 years.
So was that a pretty like challenging time in your life? Do you remember?
I didn't think so. I was having fun. I thought it was fun. I was probably so oblivious that it just didn't matter to me. It just did not matter to me. I was fine. I think I was fine. I think back at it and I was like, I had no problem.
So, did you take Ritalin like for a while consistently, and then you started spitting it out, or was it pretty much like right away you just kind of started? I'm not going to do this.
Probably like so fourth grade is when I started taking it. By fifth grade, I think I started spitting it out. Definitely fifth and sixth grade, I was spitting it out more. Fifth and sixth grade, it was different though, because up until that point, I had all female teachers. In fifth grade, we had Mr. Horowitz, who he later on in it, like once we graduated high school many years later, some of the kids in my very class brought a lawsuit against him because he was physically abusive. He did a few things, but I it didn't like dawn on me that like okay, this is physically abusive. I didn't care. It didn't mean anything to me. So he was tough, and so I couldn't get away with as much. And then Mr. Hoffman, who was the sixth grade teacher, he was like a legit tough guy. He had muscles and he'd like roll his sleeves up. He was a gymnastics coach too. So although I was still getting in trouble, I was a bit better behaved, I think, with the male teachers.
So in fourth grade, would it be fair to say that you were like kind of becoming like a little bit more attentive, like focused on classes, just because of the Ritalin's kind of chilling you out a little bit? And then fifth and sixth grade, you might have kind of stayed in that pattern where you were pretty well behaved in school, just because you had stronger male teachers that might have enforced that a little bit better.
Yeah, it wasn't like all one way or the other. It kind of was like back and forth. I get in trouble sometimes. Like I remember one time, I think it was fifth grade, me and a bunch of kids. So this is when like girls started, like boys and girls started getting together, and of course I like led that. So it was like me and my guys. I had like we'd set up like dates with the girls, and so there was like a group of like three girls. All the girls liked me, by the way, and I was in like fifth or sixth grade because I was high status because I was fast, strong, and funny, and kind of good looking as a kid. So all the girls liked me, but there were these three girls: Laura Jean, Lauren, and Tiffany. And we would go hang out with them. And I remember one time, I think Laura Jean's mom smoked cigarettes, and she stole a pack from her mom, and we all went down by the creek, by the brook. It was a brook. My school's name was Brookside, so we went down by the brook during lunch. We were smoking cigarettes. we got trouble. That was like probably the biggest trouble that we got into at the time.
What grade was that in?
I want to say like fifth or sixth grade, like the end of fifth grade, sixth grade, somewhere around there.
And then you said you would set up dates like with you and your guy friends and then your girlfriends. Like, what did that look like at recess or like after school? Like, do you have any memories of that?
Um, yeah, we would go to my house down in my basement. I had like a furnished basement, and yeah, we do naughty things. So yeah, like, we would go to my house, or we would go to like some of the we would take turns and we go to each other's houses. And like in New York, Long Island, we have basements, so we would have like basement parties, and we just go downstairs, shut the door, and like do naughty things.
And like in terms of like family life at this time, like what were you doing with your family? Were you like, you guys have any like holiday events? Like, you guys eating supper together? Like, how did your family life kind of look?
We always ate dinner together. That was a rule. We had to be home for dinner. My dad didn't like us going out past night, like dark. We had to be home unless we were at someone's house. and they knew. Um, Sundays were, even though my parents were religious, Sundays were like Sabbath day, but which basically meant nobody was allowed to go anywhere, and you just had to do your chores. So it wasn't even like real Sabbath. Like it was slave day. It was like you don't go anywhere. You gotta clean the house. So we had to clean the house on Sundays. I spent a lot of time with my siblings, just laying around watching cartoons. Um, yeah, it was nice.
What cartoons were you watching at this age?
Oh, I don't know if I could pull a few out. Of course, we always watched Bugs Bunny, Looney Tunes, Tom and Jerry, He-Man, She-Ra, G.I. Joe, Transformers, um, stuff like that. Saved by the Bell, which wasn't a cartoon, but it was like a show. Yeah, I mean there were so many DuckTales and stuff like that.
Did you guys watch any movies at all, or was it mainly like TV shows?
Yeah, we watched movies. We had VHS tapes. My parents would buy us VHS tapes, and we plug them in. We watch movies over and over again. My brother Eric was obsessed with Little Mermaid, so we were forced to watch Little Mermaid. Like he would throw a fit if we didn't watch it every day. Literally, Little Mermaid was on every day, and he knew every line. Like he would. It was annoying because we'd watch it, but he'd be like saying it along the whole time, and he would belt out and singing every time Ariel, the mermaid, would sing. He would sing too. So, but he didn't care. If we all left, he would just sit there and watch it himself. So I remember Little Mermaid like hell. He played that tape till it popped. Um, Man, I think that's about it. Scooby Doo comes to mind right now, but
Do you remember the
that's,
old
that's
tube TVs?
yeah. We had the little dial. We changed the channels. We had an antenna on it. So my dad got an antenna on the house, and we plugged it in, and it worked better. Um, we didn't have cable TV. A couple of my neighbors had cable TV, so they had like the big thing with that you push the buttons, right? It's like this big thing, and you like pop the button down, and then you push another one and it pop up. Like that's how we watched. That's how you get the channels. So I always thought that was cool, but we never had that. We only had the basic like 6 channels.
So then football and your cousin also kind of became a big deal at this time. Can you tell me a little bit
Hmm.
more about like some memories from football or memories about your cousin?
Yeah, so Lloyd, we called him Lloydie, was like he was like my big brother growing up because he was like the only older male cousin he was 5 years older than me. So I was like, his dog tail. Like I would follow him everywhere. I thought he was awesome. He introduced me to all, like all the bad things. So he was awesome. And when he would come over a lot when I was younger, he lived in Queens when we were in Long Island, but he'd come over like almost every weekend. He and Loyola, so Lloydie and Loyola would come over a lot. They spent a lot of time with us. But then when he got into high school, his dad didn't want to send him to the public high school in Queens because it was bad. So he sent him to basically come live with me and my parents in Long Island to go to high school there, which was it was a little sus because he was in ninth grade. He didn't have a driver's license, but his dad let him take a car. So he had a Jeep Cherokee, a red Jeep Cherokee. He was the only kid in the high school that had a car, and he had a nice one. He had a Jeep, and so he would drive me around, and like I was being introduced to like high school girls, and they thought I was so cute. So I drive around with Lloyd, and yeah, I'd be sitting with like these grown women, and it was cool. And also, he had a BB gun. I remember driving around in his car, and he and his friends they would like just shoot people. Like this is horrible, but they would shoot people with a BB gun, and you just see people like grab their ass and like and they drive off, and we thought it was hilarious. It's terrible, but we were kids. Anyway, he came, and because he was a few years ahead of me, his reputation preceded me. So he was into football. Girls liked him. He had a car. He had a BB gun. So by the time I was in middle school, like the younger sisters of like a lot of his friends, and they like knew me because of Lloyd. And so like I was like instant popular, more instant popular as a result of him, because he was awesome. And he played football. So that's when I was introduced to football. And I thought he was awesome because he was big and he was strong and he played football. But by the time I got to high school, he had just left and I came up right behind him and I was better than him. I was incredible at football. And my uncle, who still lived with us when we were younger, he came back into my life around that time and started teaching us how to lift with barbells. So I was like, and nobody else was lifting. I was like the only kid that like had weights in my basement, and I started lifting. And so I'm like growing muscle in like ninth and 10th grade. And it was incredible. I don't know how we got there, but
So if it wasn't so popular for other people to be weightlifting at that time, like, do you know how your uncle was introduced to it or how he knew about it?
yeah, well, it was popular. Bodybuilding was a thing. It become popularized in like the 60s and 70s, but it wasn't something that like nowadays you probably lift. Like people lift. Like people like if you're a man and you don't lift, it's kind of like weird now. It's like, oh, you don't work out? Like, well, and everybody knows they should work out. But in the 80s and 90s, that wasn't a thing. It was like, no, people don't lift weights. Like men, even athletes, like a lot of sports, they're like, you don't want to get muscle bound, like, stay away from those weights. It was a taboo thing. It was also like relegated to like homosexual stuff too. It was like, oh, bodybuilders and they're oiling themselves up and they're kind of gay. And so it wasn't like a cult, it wasn't into the culture yet. But my uncle, being from a martial arts background and into fitness, he took a certification to become a fitness trainer. This is like 1992, before it was like even a thing. Now everybody knows, like, oh, yeah, you could be a trainer. You could be a trainer. It wasn't even a profession. It was nothing back then. And he became a trainer and would train people out of a boxing gym how to lift weights and like, get stronger so that they could win more matches. So he brought that over to our house and taught us how to lift. And then I would take all my high school football friends, bring them over to my house, and I taught them how to lift. And so that's how I started becoming a strength coach.
Very interesting. So in the fourth and fifth and sixth grade, you're hanging out with your cousin a lot. Did you become kind of disinterested in hanging out with kids your age because you were more interested in like hanging out with older kids because you're your older cousin?
No, I didn't lose interest in the kids in my grade. I just gravitated to the kids that were doing bad things. They were so much more fun. I looked for
No.
trouble. Like, all right, who's getting in trouble around here so I can join? Yeah, so the kids that were drinking, the kids that were smoking, the kids that were doing drugs and having sex, wow, that's where I wanted to be.
And then your cousin was how much older than you? Like 2 or 3 years?
Five, so 4 grades above me, five
Okay.
years older. Yeah.
And in terms of like football in those years, like what did that look like for you? Was your team pretty good? Like, do you remember, having a lot of success? I mean, obviously you had a lot of success, but like, do you remember any specific plays that kind of stood out to you? Let's kind of explore that a little bit.
I remember being in middle school, and here it comes again. Like, I was smashing people. I was strong and I was fast and I was aggressive. And by all intents and purposes, I should have been a running back. I'm built like a running back. I'm fast and I'll mow you down and I can elude you. And so the coach put me as a running back for the first time. And I didn't understand the play because I was used to playing defense. Because in Pop Warren, like the Bombers, who was the younger kids before middle school, I always played defense, and I knew exactly what to do when the ball was snapped. Go and kill the man with the ball. That was it. That's all I needed to know. Playing offense was a little more nuanced. It's like you got to wait, and you got to like pay attention, and then you got to take action. And I didn't get it like the first like two or three times, and he lost patience with me and was like, "You're too stupid to play offense. Go back and play and get on defense." And he was also my math teacher, and I was doing poorly in math. I always did poor in math, and that wounded me. That wounded me because now here I am unable to do what I know I can do better than anybody else, but because I'm stupid, I can't. And like I took that to heart. And that plagued me like for the rest of my football career. And I avoided playing offense because I was too stupid. But I was faster than all the running backs. I was better than all of them. But I just didn't let myself ascend to that. And that stuck out to me. By the time I got to college, all the running backs were injured. I was faster than all of them. And there was like, why wouldn't we make Elliott a running back? And then I came running back for my last 2 years of college, and I was the best. But by then it was too late. I was like, there was no hope for me to do anything else.
So we're zooming forward a little bit. Do you remember who your coach was in fourth, fifth, and sixth grade?
Sixth grade is when I started football. I don't remember who the coaches were. Coach Ruggiano, some Italian guy. I don't really remember. I
You were
remember I
primarily on
had
defense.
yeah, I played offensive line as a center and nose guard on defense. So I played line.
And then what would you do like in the summers? Like what would you fill your time with?
In like middle school, sixth grade,
Yes, sixth,
seventh grade,
seventh grade.
get in trouble. I remember I was always eccentric. I would just find trouble to get into. Um I remember dyeing my hair one time, like putting Clorox or like not bleach, what was it? Some chemical I put in my hair. I bleached my hair like it was like white. I remember getting a BB gun and shooting out car windows. Um, I remember breaking into an abandoned house, me and some of the kids, and we just breaking windows. Breaking windows apparently was fun. So during those summers, that's when we would take our bikes and we'd go and hang out with the girls. Um, yeah, that was summer on Long Island. We play a lot of basketball. I was getting a little bit better at basketball there. We played a lot of basketball. We played in the yard, neighbors. I remember across the street, a new family moved in, and it was a girl who was about a little bit a year older than me, and a boy who was a year younger than me. We spent a lot of time with them. My first French kiss was with a black girl named Cleopatra, who moved in she came from Queens to Long Island. I remember Cleopatra Green. And then so I learned how to French kiss because, well, she was doing it in Brooklyn and she brought it to like Long Island and showed me. I was like, oh, tongue kissing. And so I remember my neighbor, the girl across the street, you're asking me about summers. This is what I would do in the summer. I remember teaching her how to tongue kiss. We went over and would hide in her garage. Yeah, that's the stuff that I was I was doing in my summers.
Pretty eccentric summers, like you said.
Yeah.
And then seventh and eighth grade. How was that transition for you? Because this is like about the time where people start hitting puberty and bodies start changing. Like, was that an awkward phase for you, or was it like a pretty easy transition?
I grew up fast. I was doing all the bad things in seventh and eighth grade. By eighth grade, I was probably at my worst. I got arrested a bunch of times. Yeah, I was getting to a lot of fights. Um, Yeah. So I was just doing. I was kicked out of school a bunch of times. I would skip class all the time. Um, yeah, just doing all the things I probably shouldn't have been doing. Mainly in eighth grade. I think eighth grade was the worst. I had a mohawk. I was a little. I thought I was a little badass anyway. I was a little badass, getting in trouble, and it was in that like realm of being, we'd sneak out of my parents' house a lot at night. So I would, open the window and I'd leave and I'd be gone, like, all night long. And I'd be running the streets with like my gang, right? This is when I started hanging out with black kids. So yeah, we were out late at night. Their parents, I guess, didn't care. And so we'd be out running the streets and we would go to the town next door. This is ninth grade, so I'm kind of skipping ahead. But eighth grade was all just bad stuff: smoking, drugs, drinking, sex, fighting, getting kicked out of school. I pulled the alarm, the fire alarm, and it just does just dumb, impulsive stuff. Um, Creating forged um, um, report cards because I was still a very good athlete. I wrestled and I was like undefeated wrestling. And the wrestling coach was like, my dad was still strict. Of all of this, I was grounded a lot, by the way. It wasn't like I was running my parents into the ground and like, doing what I wanted to do. I just didn't care. I was grounded all the time. So it was like, and I just took the punishment. I was like, oh, that's it. I'm gonna be grounded. Oh, be grounded for a month. I don't care. And then I'd get out and I'd just do it again. I was a repeat offender. And my dad was just like, whatever. My dad actually, at some point, because I was always sneaking out of my window, I ran away once. He took all my stuff from my bedroom and put it down in the basement. And I lived in the basement. It was funny because that was about the time that I started lifting too. So it was like I was sleeping next to the barbell, literally. So I'd sleep down in the basement. But anyway, it was around this time, getting in trouble. I was on probation. I was just doing bad stuff. One night, I snuck out of my house and I was running the street with the black kids from my neighborhood. And we went to the town next door and we met some girls late at night, stuck into the girl's house. Her mom was sleeping. And, we were hooking up. And that's where I met my soon to be wife. Hooking up in ninth grade in her mom's house. Actually, it's her grandfather's house. Her father's house that her mom lived in because her parents broke up. And it was like, you could tell she came from like a pretty broken, messed up family. And here I stumble upon the scene and I'm just trying to get some. And long story short, she's my wife. Amazing, amazing marriage. And we got 4 kids now. So
In terms of like what you guys were eating, like were you still eating pretty much same food, eating healthy and just eating really good meals?
no, nah. This was about the time that my aunt got sick and she was getting old and she really couldn't cook as much as she used to. And my mom, working a full-time job at night, she would make chicken nuggets. She did the best that she could, but she was busy. So we didn't eat as well. And I also had like dysfunctional eating patterns because of wrestling. I had to lose weight for wrestling. And so I remember like living off of skim milk and Kit Kats. Like that's what I had for lunch every day: skim milk and Kit Kats. For breakfast, maybe I'd have like skim milk and Rice Krispies. And then for dinner, I'd come home and my mom would like make chicken nuggets. So I was eating pretty poorly then. And it showed up in my skin. I had really bad acne.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, did you notice any like health issues at that time?
Nah, except skin. Skin was just a mess. And I'm pretty sure a lot of my behavioral issues were due to like malnutrition and like eating the wrong things. Because even now as an adult, if I don't get enough of the right nutrition and rest, I'm not a nice person. So I'm pretty sure it led to a lot of my rebellion and bad behavior because, like, I literally had a brain made up of Kit Kats.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I definitely had I was pretty malnourished too as a kid, so I struggled with acne as well. Um, but yeah, kind of moving into like high school, man. How did that transition look like for you from middle school to high school?
Well, ninth grade was a lot of the repeat of eighth grade. I was getting in trouble, but a little bit less because football and lifting. Football and lifting kept me like, I loved football so much that I was like, I'm not going to do anything to lose that. And besides that, like more and more of my friends were like football players. So we were like bonded around that. But most importantly was Colleen, who lived in the town next door. Her mom needed to be hospitalized, so she had to move to Baldwin, my town. And her dad lived, a couple miles away from my house. So she moved into my school, and I was the only one she knew. She was the new girl, and we were dating. It was supposed to be just a summer thing, but God had his way. And so she came over. And as a result of football, lifting, and now my like goody two shoe girlfriend, who like gets all good grades, she's just a good girl, except, hanging out with me, which was bad. But basically like a good student, my grades started getting better. My like everything started changing for me, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. I wasn't getting any trouble. I had an identity in football and lifting. My girlfriend occupied most of my attention, and between lifting and fornicating with her, it like that's where I was able to put all of my like aggressive energy and like the energy that I was using to get in trouble. It was now like channeled into these like three things: my girlfriend, my workouts, and football. And that was like my focus. Grades got better because I wanted to hang out with Colleen and she was doing her homework. So it was like, okay, well, we're going to do homework. All right. And if I didn't understand the homework, she did it for me. If I didn't understand something that I needed to pass a test for, she would tutor me. So things started turning around at that time.
So you're a coach now, and you've been a coach for a while. I'm
Mhm.
curious if you could go back in time and talk to that like seventh and eighth grade version of yourself, like what would you tell him?
Nothing. There's nothing I could have told that kid. Because if I know him, he wouldn't listen. He has no interest in what anybody has to tell him about anything except for what he wants to do. So I know as 46-year-old Elliott, if I was talking to 13-year-old Elliott, I'd be wasting my breath. I just let him be. You'll figure it out.
That's a good answer. So ninth, 10th, 11th, 12th grade, you kind of start chilling out a little bit. You start kind of focusing on your core three things. You got Colleen. Were you and Colleen together like all throughout high school?
Yes, sir.
Interesting. Okay. And then do you remember any notable influences that you had in high school, like any teachers, coaches, things like that?
My uncle, my uncle who taught us how to lift. He would come over on the weekends and he taught me and my brother how to lift. So he was like the main mentor for me building up into those years, early high school and then, 10th, 11th grade. Um, my football coach was great. I liked my football coaches. Um, but that was about it. You got to remember too, like, this is 1990. Like, there was no Elliott Hulse or Jordan Peterson or Andrew Tate for me to, like, you know, fanboy over and watch all their videos. So it was just whoever was around, and it was just the basics. Teachers, teachers were fine. None of them stick out to me at all. I mean, I was there just to kill time. Football coaches, they were fine. They were cool. I appreciated them. Um, my dad was always super supportive. Like he came to every single one of my games in high school and college. And my uncle, I mean, my dad and my uncle were like my two masculine influences, really.
What do you remember about the like evolution of your relationship with your dad and uncle at this time?
Well, with my uncle, it was always cool. He was my favorite uncle. I always looked up to him. He was awesome, and just more and more awesome as I got older because I could relate to him more as a man. Um, my dad, however, he softened up on me a lot because I wasn't getting as much trouble. He didn't like the idea that Colleen was always at my house. This was a thing. Like I wouldn't allow one of my daughters to do that. Like you're like literally living. She was like literally living at my house. She would be there from before school started till late at night. She'd take a taxi home, and it was like 7 days a week. And at first, he really didn't like it, but then he noticed, like, huh, my son's not getting in trouble anymore. Like she's calming him down. So I think he saw it as like saw her as like a means to get me to stay in line. And so I stopped getting grounded. Like everything eased up. Everything got better when she started coming around. So my dad was, he was, I don't want to say he was happy. He loved that I played football. He was very proud of me about that. But like he conceded to having my girlfriend living with us in my bedroom with the door shut, you know, sinning because that was keeping me out off the streets.
Do you remember like what you used to do? Did you hang out with your siblings at all throughout high school?
Yeah, so she became like one of us. So we would like all sit and watch TV together. We'd watch movies together. We had a den where we just watched TV. It was just a room in my house. And yeah, that's what we did. We would, yeah, come home and just watch TV. That's what we did. Of course, we'd lift, me and my brother, and we'd play sports and stuff. And Colleen had a job. She worked at a fried chicken shack. And yeah, my brothers I ended up fighting for my brothers a lot. I fought for Eric a lot because he was gay, and so he got picked on, and so I'd have to stick up for him, even though I didn't like it. I was like, why are you like this? But he's my brother, and I loved him. I was like, so you're not gonna fuck with him or not mess with him. Ellis was always in trouble. He was always getting in fights with people that would otherwise destroy him. So I had to stick up for him a lot. And Stacy was just there. She was just like one of the boys, and she and Colleen spent a lot of time together.
And then with like your dad and uncle, like what would you guys do together? I mean, with your uncle, would you like lift weights and things like that?
Yeah, my uncle came over once a week and we'd lift weights. My dad was always working. My dad was always home, like after work, but he's working in the garage. He would take up like extra jobs. So he'd be in the garage, like fixing people's cars or landscaping, because like our house had the nicest yard because my dad like was obsessed with like keeping his lawn nice, keeping his flowers and his hedges. Like our house was always immaculate on the outside. So he was always out there. He was always working. He was always doing that stuff. Um, when he would come around, we were all like nervous because he would come in and you like as a kid we're lazy, like we're just laying there watching TV, we're not doing anything, and he like that he just came in from doing 8 hours of work. He's walking in the house and he's about to walk back out and he's going to do 6 more hours of work before he goes to bed way after we do. And it was like uncomfortable because he would come in and like the sentiment was What are you guys doing? You guys are wasting time. Why don't you guys go do something constructive? And like we really couldn't live up to that. Like, oh, Dad, we we're just kids. We're just watching TV. So it was always uncomfortable because the den was between the kitchen, the rest of the house, and the backyard where he would go into his garage and work. So he'd walk in and walk out, walk in and out. And I think during that time, my brother Ellis and I started picking up the bad habit of holding our balls. We'd always have our hands in our pants. But when my dad would walk by, we'd like hold our balls. And I think it was like an unconscious thing, like, uh-oh, here comes dad. He's gonna bust our balls.
What about with your mom?
My mom worked nights, so she would sleep in the day. So we saw her, but it was limited. We didn't see her that much. She'd wake up and then she would do her mom things like, take us to appointments or, she would make dinner. Um, I remember my mom being sad a lot because she would come home after children would die. I remember mom being grumpy a lot because, she's trying to sleep and we're making noise. Um, yeah, well, that's about it.
So she was still doing like working at a hospice at this point.
Yeah, pretty much until I graduated high school.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's pretty heavy stuff. I mean, you said all the children that would basically come to her would basically kind of be sentenced to like they were gonna die.
Yes.
Man, yeah, she got to be a strong woman to do that type of work.
Oh yeah. Yeah, she was. She would sometimes bring home pictures of the kids. These were like mangled kids. Like some of them were born with like really bad deformities. And like they would like freak us out when we were kids. Like my mom would make us look at the pictures, like, you think you have it bad? Look at this kid. And it was, it was like, and I say this from the perspective of a kid. It was like looking at a monster. I was like, no, no, mom, I don't want to. And she would like threaten, like, I'm going to bring you to the hospital to see the children that I work with. And we're like, no, please don't. Some of them were like abused. Like there were kids that were like badly burned because like their parents like poured scalding hot water on them and or just accidents would happen, just bad things. So you kind of like she she carried a lot of that pain and sadness and would threaten us with it.
Man, that's tough. And then did you learn any other lessons from your mom? Do you remember at that age?
Lessons? I don't know, but definitely a lot by osmosis. We can't help but to pick up our mom's nature. It's just, I mean, it's in me. It's in me now. And so I don't know if I picked up any verbal lessons, but ways of being for sure.
What ways of being do you think are like come to mind?
Uh, uh, I don't know, like silly things. I don't know if it's nature or nurture, but like just the way she eats. Like my mom likes good food. She likes to eat and almost eats like out of pleasure. And I took that on too. Like I like good food. Like me and my mom will be like the only ones that will like suck the marrow out of a bone. We'll like, eat a steak right down, like, we'll chew on the bone. Like we prefer dark meat, fatty meats, liver. So like a lot of her likes and tastes in that realm, she and I agree on. Um, she's a masochist, beats herself up a lot. Like she enjoys pain in a weird way. Like, she'll subject herself to like the job that she did. That's a total masochist job. Like to do that is like you subject yourself to pain. And so I do a lot of that myself too. I subject myself to pain. I beat myself up. I'm a masochist. Um, Breathing. My mom always had like asthma and allergies. She always like was always wheezing and always had a hard time breathing uh, because of anxiety. And so I developed that for sure. Shallow breathing, tense muscles, um, anxious, could like my mom could snap in a moment. Like there were times where she's like, fine, 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 bang, snap. It's like, whoa, what happened? And so like I picked up on that too. So just different ways. Like I said, I don't know if it's nature or nurture, but I definitely take after her. I take after both of my parents a lot, but there's a hell of a lot of my mom in me for sure.
And was there anything that I know you mentioned through osmosis, like social osmosis? Can you explain like what that means for someone who might not understand what that is?
Well, just by being in the environment of someone, you pick up their behaviors, you pick up their thought patterns, you pick up their 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 spirit, really. And it happens to all of us. You go spend, like they say, like you become the people you spend the most time around, right? They say, show me your five best friends and I'll show you who you're becoming. So, we all pick up stuff by osmosis from our parents, things that we like, things that we don't like, things that are conscious, things that are unconscious. So just as an adult, I can look back and I can see some of those things that were passed on to me. I don't know if they're genetic, epigenetic, or what, but they're there.
And that's a great explanation, by the way. Did you have any things that you learned from your dad through social osmosis that you remember at this time?
Yeah, a lot like my dad too. My dad's rebellious. My dad uh, fights what he wants. My dad's also very generous. Like, he fights for the small guy. I use these terms lightly, but my mom being a masochist, where like it's a lot about like, taking the burden, taking the brunt of the pain and like, biting your lip and bearing it. That's my mom. My dad's more of a psychopath in that like he fights for what he wants, he speaks up and gets what he wants, he's not afraid to piss you off, he fights for the little guy, he'll piss you off before he pisses him off, and he'll sleep fine as a result. He doesn't care.
Yeah, I watched your interview with your dad on YouTube. That was one of the videos that stuck out to me the most. It was really cool.
Hmm.
Um, with your cousin at the time, were you still hanging out with him during high school?
No, by then he had moved on and he graduated, so I didn't really spend much time with him after that.
And then how was football going?
Football was amazing. I was, statistical leader in multiple categories and captain of the team and did really well. I loved it. And my girlfriend became a cheerleader. So, she could spend more time with me and it was awesome. And then I got a scholarship to play football at St. John's University in Queens. And yeah, that carried through until college.
What good memories do you have from football in high school?
Uh Memories that I have, it's I really liked summer camp. I liked football camp, 2 a days. We go away and we go up to upstate New York, and we were just tortured for for a week straight. And I loved it. I loved it. Like it was, they would call it like Hell Week, but it was like I looked forward to it. It was my favorite thing to do. We get woken up at 5 in the morning to do PT. We go run, and we'd eat like slop for breakfast. And then we would do, defensive drills, position drills, team drills. Then we would do scrimmages in the evening, staying up at night, hazing one another. Yeah, it was great.
Do you remember any like really good plays that you made in high school that kind of stick out to you?
I don't remember any one play in particular, but I was a terror to quarterbacks. Nightmares. Because I was always on their tail. I didn't play conventionally. They put me on the defensive line, but I played kind of like a linebacker. So I would like chase the quarterback. I would chase the quarterback, right? Make him. They say I led the league in hurries. That was a thing. Hurries, meaning like he's not gonna. have an easy throw. I'm always chasing quarterbacks, and then he'd throw it, and then you'd catch me downfield making the tackle because I was faster than the D back. So I'm like, I chase the quarterback, he'd throw it, he somebody catch the ball, and I'm chasing the guy with the ball. So I'm making the tackle downfield. That happened like all the time. I was all over the field.
Were you known like locally as sort of a menace to like the quarterback?
Oh yeah, for sure. That's the best way to say it.
So it kind of like built into your reputation a little bit.
Yeah.
Huh.
I was fast off the ball. That was part of the reason why. But I also, so I had more sacks than anybody, but I also had more offsides. So I anticipated a lot.
And then in seventh and eighth grade, you had this one coach who told you, like, man, you're not going to be a running back. Like, what was your mentality around that during high school? Did you have any, like, inclination of, like, wanting to come back and be a running back? Or did that just kind of dissipate?
No, I kind of had sour grapes at that point, meaning I became like indignant, resentful. I was like, well, then screw it. I'm just gonna terrorize quarterbacks. And so I made it out to be like only sissies played offense. And my job was just to destroy them. So I would just crush running backs. I was like, I can't be one of you, but I will make your life hell. I was a menace. I would so this was back in the day when you can actually like we would tackle with our heads. Now you like that's a big time penalty because of concussions and stuff. I literally smashed my head into people. What I did it, and I have the biggest scars we would call it over my whole helmet. My helmet was chipped. It was the ugliest helmet. And then I took a knife one day and I carved the words Kill, the letters kill, right down my my helmet. So whenever I get down on the line, they'd see that kill, and they'd see all these scars, all these scars. So I was out for vengeance. I was not going to let anybody enjoy themselves as a offensive player.
You basically brought, like, you're like a Roman warrior in football, it sounds like.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Um, so moving into like college years, and we can stay on the line of football. Like, what was the catalyst? Because you said you turned into a running back in college, and how did that look?
Um, I got better and better at playing nose guard my freshman year. I put on a lot of weight. So even though I was vertically challenged, 5'9", I was like 230 pounds, just like a bowling ball and fast. Even at my heaviest, I was faster than everybody else. So I had some really good coaches that didn't let me get away with just being fast, but they made me like engage with the player in front of me. So I got really good at using my strength now. It wasn't just my speed, it was my strength. So I was really fast off the line, and I just get right up on the shoulder blades of the player in front of me. And because I was shorter and because still used to use my head, I get my head right up into his right here, and I just steer them around. And I did whatever I wanted in the background. Just get right up on them, boom. I got really good at that move. And then swimming. So I was really good. And there was no reason for me to play any other position. When we were like when they needed a sack, they would put me on the end and I'd rush in. Right. So I led the team in sacks and tackles behind the line, tackles for loss. And when junior year came around, I mean, every year I had the fastest 40 like on the team. It's ridiculous. I'm a defensive lineman, and I'm blowing everybody on the 40-yard dash and the 10-yard shuttle. I was quick and I was fast. But I played defense and I was okay there. I loved it. I won't say I resigned to that, but I was like, yeah, this is what I am. And then my junior year, all the running backs got hurt. Injuries, shoulder, back, leg, ankle, whatever. And I was like, well, we don't have any running backs. And then one of the coaches was like, why don't we give Elliott the ball? He is the fastest one. And that year, I led the team in sacks and touchdowns.
That had to have been a pretty good feeling.
Yeah, that was fun. That was a lot of fun. I had that. My last 2 years of playing college football was like, those were my highlights. So I went out with a bang. It was great.
So those were your last 2 years, though. Like your first 2 years, you were on defense.
Hmm.
Okay. And then what did your first 2 years of college look like elsewise? Like, were you still with Colleen? Like, how far away were you from home?
She and I went to separate colleges about an hour apart. She was in Connecticut. I was in New York. So the first year, we saw each other like every other weekend. She came to all of my games. So she would travel. She'd get come home and travel with my dad to wherever I was playing. Um, when I wasn't playing football, I'd go up to her campus and hang out with her. But I also spent a lot of time in Queens with it wasn't just all with her. It was a lot of time I spent with my team. So, stupid stuff besides lifting and like once again, I would take a lot of the guys from the football team would lift with me over the summer. There was a point where I got in a fight with my the strength coach, because being arrogant, and young, I was like, I knew better than him. That was I had in my mind. I was like, I'm a better strength coach than this bum strength coach. And I got in fights with strength coaches a lot because I wanted to be the strength coach. So in the summers, yeah, they would come over to my house and we would lift. I built programs so that we would be in great shape. And we did a lot of drinking. A lot of going to nightclubs and bars. So there was that. And then later on in college, I kind of stopped hanging out with my friends so much, and I was spending almost every weekend with Colleen. Either she came down to be with me, or I'd go up to be with her.
You said you were getting in fights with your strength coach. Was it like verbal or like physical? Like, were you just kind of
No,
combative?
verbal. Like I would argue. I disagree. Like I disagree. I think we should be doing these lifts instead. And I don't want to do what you're doing. I want to do what I want to do. So how about I just don't come? And how about, these other guys are going to come with me and we're going to do our own workouts. And that's no way to like, you can't run a team like that. But like, I didn't care. I wanted what I wanted. And so
What was
we
his
had two
reaction to that?
coaches with both of them. The first one, I tried that on him. He was like, no, he was a lot tougher. And then the second one, he resigned and another strength coach came in. I tried it with him and he was like, no. So yeah, I got to do this.
So, but you were designing programs at this time already. Like, what do you remember? Like, what you were putting together? Was it like deadlifts? Were you doing the big boulders at this time? Like, what did that look like?
No, I wasn't doing strongman. I didn't do strongman until many, many, many years later. No, it was like bigger, faster, stronger. It was I had this one book. I'm looking for it right now because I still have it. Oh, there it is. Complete Strength and Conditioning for Football. The Nebraska State Football Training Program. So I bought books. I bought football training books. So that's how I designed the programs.
Gotcha. Was it like the three standard, like three core lifts, like bench, squat, deadlift, and then like a lot
A
of
lot of
running
that.
program?
Exactly. Yeah. Power cleans and running and jumping.
Did you do a lot of military press?
I don't remember. I don't think so. It was mostly I was great at squatting, so it was a lot of squats. It was deadlifting, power cleans, and bench press.
So then in college, in your first couple of years, like family wise, were you still pretty close with your family?
When I was in college,
Yeah.
I mean, I lived at home, but I was busy, you know. I go to school, I come home late at night. I mean, I may not see my siblings or my parents like for days. Close meaning like, yeah, I love them. I mean, we were a loving family. My dad would come to all my games, you know. So it was just like I'd see them in passing, but it wasn't like we didn't love each other.
Gotcha. So you're just like pretty focused on college at the time, and then what did you go to college for? Like, what kind of a major?
I went to college for football.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why I was there. Now I was forced to take a major,
Right.
so you know I took healthcare administration, basically hospital management, and I had no intention whatsoever of doing anything with it. I was like, well, I have no. So I remember like the professor, like one of the professors who was like I guess like the dean of that school, like tried to threaten me one day. He was like, you know, you're not going to get a good internship and a job at a hospital if you keep ignoring these things. And I was like, I don't care. He's like, you don't care? You're not trying to get a job in a hospital? I was like, nope. And
And
so
then,
he realized very quickly. He's like, oh, this kid doesn't give a shit. He just needs to pass these grades so that he could play football.
so then, like, what were your classes like? Did you go to class and you just like weren't very attentive, or, like didn't really care very much?
Oh, I did well enough. Yeah, I went to basically all of my classes. Um, and I passed all my classes. I probably graduated with like a 3.3, 3.2, you know, so I did good enough.
You think that was because, like, I know in high school you said Colleen was a pretty good influence on you in terms of like your studiousness and like how, like, what kind of a student you were. Like, did that kind of translate into college then?
Man, I don't remember studying at all. I don't remember. I don't remember college. I'm sorry. I just don't. I know that I passed the tests that I need to pass. And I must have done some study. I think I remember studying with some of my football friends that we had the same classes together, but it was literally just to pass the test. And I don't remember any of my classes.
So it's kind of like a blurry phase of your life.
Yeah, well, the academic part was blurry. I mean, football and getting into trouble and Colleen, it was like, I remember that stuff.
Sure. And then you said, once you became like a running back, that was a pretty pivotal, time for you. Can we kind of explore that a little bit? Like, how did it feel one becoming a running back after, your coach in seventh and eighth grade was like, dude, you're not gonna do this. And then, finally
Yeah.
kind of get your moment to shine.
It was exactly what it was supposed to be. It was like a perfect fit. And the newspapers, I was getting articles, I was getting awards, I was getting interviewed. Um, I was getting a lot of temptation because all of a sudden, like a lot of girls were interested in me all of a sudden, you know, and like so there was not much temptation like to cheat on Colleen. But when I became like famous, it was like, wow, it's you, you're the one. Girls would come from other campuses, from other schools to come and watch me play. So I became like high status, like for the first time in a way I've never been before. And so that was that was interesting and fun.
Do you remember any of the interviews that you did?
Yeah, I mean, being interviewed for the New York Post, the New York, what's the one? There's another one, New York Times, or there's another one, Newsday, and then the college newspaper, you know, the university newspaper. Um, yeah,
So did you go to like a D1 school for college or for football?
it was D1 AA,
Okay.
so like in between D1 and D2.
And those are some pretty big publications like the New York Times and New York Post.
Yeah, yeah, it was a big deal. It was a big deal for a little while.
Yeah. So that's interesting. I mean, like what was your did you become pretty like well known in your state then and kind of you said I mean other girls were coming from different schools, so you're kind of getting some recognition across the country.
I wouldn't say across the country, but the conference, and locally, right? So people that knew me, that people that knew of me, people would hear about me, just stuff like that. And there were like a lot of pictures of me. And I was becoming better looking around that time. Right? I was like kind of leaning out a little bit because I was doing more running. And so like there were a lot of handsome pictures of me going around. And so that like when we would like go to other schools, I would be in the book, like the football book, like here are the players, the programs. And so that's how like my my popularity spread with girls. Who's that guy? And then they'd hear my name over and over again and then come seek me out.
Very cool. And then do you remember how your seasons went those last 2 years in terms of from like a team perspective?
Every team I played on did almost good enough, almost well. Like I think went to playoffs, almost every year. When I was on the defense was always we were ranked the number one defense in the country for the first 2 years that I played only on defense. Um, we always had winning seasons, but I was never on a championship team.
And then was there any like notable plays or games that kind of stick out to you?
It just that when I first started grabbing the ball and playing running back, like I was just making huge touchdowns. Like I can think they're like all rattling off in my head right now. I mean, just different Iona, Stony Brook, Duquesne, Georgetown. Like I remember all these games where like I'm running for touchdowns and then getting back because my defensive coordinator didn't want to lose me on defense. So then I'd get back, and I played special teams. So like I'd score a touchdown and I'd get right back on special teams, and then they'd kick off the ball, and I'd be on defense again. And then I'd like make a sack, and then I'd go back, and then I'd run for 20 yards.
So you were like pretty physically conditioned. I mean, not just strength wise, but also like cardiovascular wise.
I had the best conditioning on the team too. Sounds like I'm bragging, but I did. We would run gassers at the end of practice. You got to run like up and down the field, and I was a half a field ahead of everybody.
I mean, that's extraordinary for sure. And so I'm just trying to like picture because there's probably some guys on your team that are like maybe like one my size, like a little bit smaller, and like they're looking at this 230-pound guy, and he's just crushing them in endurance drills, and it's like, dude, like, who is this guy?
Yeah, yeah. I would do bear crawls too. We bear crawl. I'd bear crawl us out of the park. Like nobody could keep up with me for anything.
Do you think like working out at like a really young age and like staying pretty consistent with it over your entire lifespan, you think that gave you a pretty good edge?
It was all the steroids my mom took when I was in utero.
That's right.
That's the joke. It was all the prednisone my mom took so she could breathe when I was in utero.
Yeah. So college was pretty football focused. You made a lot of notable achievements and, had a great time in college playing football, and then you stayed with Colleen through the whole experience.
Yeah.
And
And then
then
my senior year, we got engaged.
senior year you got engaged.
Hmm.
Do you remember how you proposed?
Yeah, not very romantically. I always heard stories about how my dad proposed to my mom. It was like I was just kind of like following after my dad, and it was just kind of like a matter of fact. It was like, hey, let's get married. So I kind of like picked up on that, and that's how I proposed to her. Like we were together forever. I wasn't trying to impress her, right? It was just like, why don't we get married? And I had a ring. I was like, here's a ring. Want to get married? And she just smiled like for a year. Her face hurt so much. She was so happy. But yeah, it was not. And it's so funny because like I didn't know anything about being red pilled back then. I mean, none of the intersexual dynamic Andrew Tate stuff didn't exist back then. But I was pretty red pilled because of my dad. And he's like, I'm not gonna get on my knee. And my mom would like, oh Edmund, you're too hardcore. But he's like, I'm not gonna get on my knee for no woman. You're supposed to get on your knee for me. So I kind of took that to heart. And I was like, well, I'm not getting on my knee. My dad didn't get on his knee. I ain't gonna get on my knee. That means I'm less of a man. So
Do you remember like where you were and like what you said? I mean, I know you said just kind of like pretty basic, like we should just get married, but do you remember where you
yeah,
were?
why don't we get married? Yeah, we were so I was getting ready to go to graduate school because I wanted to study exercise physiology. And so we were visiting my graduate school to like, I don't know, I was registering or something. And when the intention was that I'm going to go away to grad school and she was going to go somewhere in Long Island. So we're going to be separated again. So I was like figuring, well, we're going to be separated. Like, well, I'm pretty sure we're going to be together forever. So let's just make a promise to stay together.
And then like where were you at? Were you like
In the parking lot at Springfield College in Springfield, Massachusetts.
were you guys like about to part ways and you're like, okay, let's make this commitment now?
No, we were getting into the car after I finished my registration, right before we got into the car.
Oh, okay. And then how did you said you were going to graduate school? Like what? I didn't go to college. I mean, I only went for like a year. So I'm curious what graduate school is. Did you get your degree? And then what is graduate school?
So I was supposed to get a master's degree. That was the whole point. I was going to get a master's degree in exercise physiology. It was with an emphasis on strength and conditioning, so that I could be hired as a strength coach at a university or a professional team. That was the intention. Didn't work out that way though. After the first semester, where I got for the first time in my life, I got a 4.0. First semester, I did really well because I was interested. So, from the kid who looked out the window and didn't do anything to like getting a 4.0, it's because like, well, interest. Now I'm actually learning things that I care about. So my abilities came out as a student. So I did really well. But it was right what happened while I was just finishing my first semester was 9/11, September 11th, 2001. And latent inside me, from in high school, was this obsession with the Marines. I loved wearing camo. I just, you remember what I told you about the garbage men, like just tough guys. I was really attracted, and I knew that Marines were like the toughest guys in America. And so when 9/11 happened, I like that, it triggered that in me. I was like, oh, we're going to war. I should be a Marine. So I quit after my first semester and I applied for OCS to become an officer. I was going to officers candidate school, but that didn't work out either. They kept pushing my date back, and I used that as an excuse to. I just changed my mind. I guess I was like, They pushed me back like 3 times because there were so many candidates because it was, after 9/11 and everybody was like patriotic and wanted to go kill bad guys. So by the third time they pushed me back, I had already committed to marrying Colleen and we started planning our wedding because I wanted to be married before I went. And so we were planning our wedding. And then I also started becoming very religious at that time too. And I bought into a religion called Baha'i. And so I became Baha'i. I became Baha'i and I was getting married. And as a Baha'i, you're not allowed to, it was against the Baha'i rules to kill anybody, even in the military. You had to be a conscientious objector. And I'm like, I'm only going to the Marines to kill. That's why I'm going. And so my devotion to Colleen and then to this faith, I pulled out. So it was like timing and it was these circumstances. And so I never ended up going to OCS.
Did you work any jobs in college? I didn't ask you about that. Um,
Not in undergrad, but once I knew that I wasn't going to continue in graduate school, I had to stay there because Colleen had to finish. Turns out she came with me, and she lived in Springfield also. So she had to finish. So I had like another year and a half, I think, until her program was done. So I worked as a mover, a moving company. And to this day, I always say that was my favorite job. I was like a garbage man, moving people's garbage into trucks and out of trucks. And it was just awesome. Like I just picked up heavy things and carried them upstairs and put them in trucks and like mindless, tough guy work. And so I did that for a while and I loved it.
yeah, do you have any notable memories from that? That's kind of cool because I mean, you were looking at guys like that when you were really young, and then you finally, got a position to where you were doing stuff like that. So, is there any notable memories from that?
I'm being nostalgic right now. I'm like, like if it, I could do that. Like I could do that for my living. I genuinely enjoy doing it. I think about the work that I do now and it's like so soft. It's like soft labor, consulting and talking and thinking and like it's like I think I'm built for doing stuff like that, but it doesn't pay. It doesn't pay and it wouldn't give me the lifestyle that I want. So I almost feel like I don't know. Of course God's plan unfolds perfectly, but there's a part of me that was built for that. Anyway, as far as like thinking back, I remember this is how strange I am because I'm saying this in one breath, but in the next breath it's like, but look, I remember being in the cab sitting between two guys that work. These were grown men. I must have been 20, 21. These guys were probably in their, late 30s, 40s, grown men. And it was a white guy and a black guy, and they didn't like each other. They would bicker with each other. And I would sit in the middle and I would bring my scripture, my prayer books. And I would just sit in the middle and I'd read. And I remember they were so perplexed and confused by me because I never got involved with their bickering. I didn't care what they were talking about. I never engaged in their conversations. I would just read my books and then work like a madman. As soon as we got to the site, it was like I just kept my mouth shut. It was just like work, boom, boom. I outworked all of them. You get in the car, they're fighting over who's going to drive and politics between the two of them, and I just read my book. And so they would like, I remember both of them at different times would come up to me, and even the owner of the company, he's like, "You don't belong here." It's like, what do you, I remember the owner coming to me one day, he's like, "Why are you here? What are you doing?" And I was like, "I needed a job." What do you mean? Why am I here? So,
That's really cool. And you said, yeah, I can just see that, man. I mean, you sitting in the middle of, probably two guys, probably about the same size, and then you're more, probably captivated by your new religion and your new spirituality that you're kind of diving into. And, part of that spirituality is probably not to like bicker and like, argue with
Yes.
each other the whole day. Like what
Yep.
book does that religion entail, or that type of spirituality
I was
entail?
probably reading, it was a Baha'i book. It was probably something like the Kitabi Akdas or the Kitabi Khan. These are books that were translated from like Arabic. So Baha'i was like I want to say like an offshoot of Islam. So it was like a lot of that kind of stuff. It wasn't the Quran, but they were like holy books, Arabic holy books.
So in what other ways does that kind of start to change your life? Because it sounded like maybe you weren't very spiritual or religious, or didn't really have a structure up until that point. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I was in and out of different Protestant denominations, kind of. Like I would go to some Bible studies but I never really was totally in, mainly because it seems too segregated for me. It was like I was either going to the black churches or the white churches. And I was like, why? And here I am, like in between. I'm like, I don't really fit in with any of y'all. So I don't know. So I kind of like I let that bother me. I was like, I don't want to go to these all black churches and bring my snowflake girlfriend. And I didn't like I didn't like the white churches so much either because they weren't as intense as the black churches. So I was torn. I didn't know. I was like, well, where do I go? Which one? And I didn't know that Catholicism was actually universal. I rejected Catholicism completely at that time and was evangelized out of it. So I wanted nothing to do with it. Now I realize when I walk into a Catholic church, it's everybody. They're all there, right? All races, all languages, all nationalities. Well, I didn't know that at the time, and I wasn't privy or interested in looking. So I ended up Baha'i because their message was unity. I saw a commercial one day and it was like little children of, it was almost like Martin Luther King, like, one day our grandchildren, my black kids and white kids are going to play together. But it was like a commercial and it was like about global unity and racial unity and religious unity and like everybody coming together and worshiping one God. And I was like, wow, that's utopian. That sounds amazing, right? And I don't remember who said it, but like if you're not a liberal in your 20s, you're heartless. But if you're not a conservative in your 40s, you're retarded. So I was very liberal, of course, like all heart, all love, all peace, all unity. And that really resonated with me. So I looked into it and I started going to their meetings and I started buying their books and I was fully enrolled. Our marriage was a Baha'i wedding. Um, we converted and that's how we lived our throughout graduate school, throughout our first years of being married in New York, up until we moved to Florida. And then I was no longer Baha'i because there were like no Baha'is in Florida. And it was very community oriented. And I was busy. Like that's when like Hustle Elliott came out because I needed to like, I had a family. So, but anyway, yeah, that's how I got into being Baha'i at the time.
Do you remember where you were on 9/11?
Yeah, I was in my apartment that I was renting with Colleen, a few miles away from Springfield University. And I remember seeing it on the TV, like turning it on and seeing like two smoking buildings. And I grew up in New York, so like I know where that is. I'm like, I've been there. What's going on? And then no, I saw one smoking building, and like all the news everywhere was on, and I was like, what is this? Is a smoking building? I didn't know what happened, but as I was watching it, you saw the next airplane comes and smashes into the second building, and I was like, whoa, this is weird. One building smoking and another one an airplane, just like how was that an accident? What just happened? Nobody knew what was going on. So I remember calling my mom and I'm like, are you seeing this? What's going on? And she's like, yeah, I see it. This is crazy. I don't know what's going on. So that I remember.
Was that like a pretty I mean it had to have been just a chaotic time in the United States. Like I was only 2 at the time, so I don't really remember very much about it at all. But do you remember like what the state of the country was kind of like after that?
It probably depended on who you were and who you were around, but from my perspective, there was a surge in patriotism. American flags were flying everywhere. Everybody was like checking in on everybody else. There was like concern and care and like unity and love. It was like, we're going to get through this, whatever's going on. And so there was like that sentiment carried for a good year or so. Like it was a weird thing because like many years later, flying an American flag became, 20 years later, flying an American flag became like, oh, you're a white supremacist. Where it was like at that time, it was like everybody. Like I remember my dad went out and bought a flag the first time we're hanging it, like everywhere on cars flying by. It didn't matter who it was. It was just America. And George Bush, we're gonna go get him and we're gonna and so I like that whole mentality was pervasive and influenced me, and that's why I wanted to be a Marine. That was before I learned about Baha'i, or maybe while I was just learning about Baha'i. And so I was like, I'm gonna kill these guys, and like the same attitude I had with football is I know I probably would have died because I'm reckless. So I was like, when I was gonna go into the Marines, they're trying to show me like all of like the nice jobs, administration jobs and security jobs and computer jobs. I'm like, no, I'm a grunt. I was like, give me a helmet and a gun and show me the mud puddle I'm gonna crawl through. I was ready for that.
Do you remember like the story, like the main narrative that was kind of being portrayed as to like why 9/11 happened at the time?
Taliban. Taliban. You got to get the Taliban. Osama bin Laden and the Taliban. And weapons of mass destruction. And what is it, Saddam Hussein? Or was Saddam Hussein the Gulf War? Anyway, it was weapons of mass destruction and Taliban. We got to get that Osama.
And what was it about weapons of mass destruction? Like, was there a threat of like nuclear warfare or?
It, it didn't matter. It didn't matter. It was, we just need to go get some bad guys that are planning to do more bad things to us. That was like the hysteria.
Hmm. And then with like your new, so you saw this commercial, and this commercial about this new religion, like that really like captivated you and like brought you in, and then you kind of became obsessed with it.
Yeah. So then I became a pacifist.
How did how did that look? I mean, I know you had a wedding in that format. Um, you were reading the main scriptures. How did that kind of transform your life and maybe your identity?
In many ways, many, many ways. In fact, I became popular on YouTube for a lot of my perspectives on things, and a lot of my perspectives came from the Baha'i scriptures. But I would say that the main thing that transformed me was the fasting. They fasted, and when I joined, I joined right during their fasting season in the spring. It was I forget what they call it, but anyway, so I fasted for the first time in my life. Mind you, this is 2001, 2002. People aren't talking about fasting on the internet. It's not a thing. In fact, most people in the scientific and medical community and the fitness community were like, you don't do that. That's a bad idea. You're going to starve your muscles. You're going to have organ failure. It's a bad idea. But, I'm an extremist and I'm like, my new religion says I need to fast. I'm fasting, even if it kills me. I was so proud and so excited to fast. And so I fasted, and it changed my body, it changed my mind, and it changed my life.
In what
That's what I
ways?
would say. I lost a bunch of weight, right? That was huge. I never skipped a meal in my entire life. So I had more self-control. I was calmer, more grounded and at peace because that's what happens when you fast. And all kinds of incredible graces were coming into my life. Like good things were just happening to me. I felt joy. I felt peace. I felt what I would now say are the fruits of the Holy Spirit: kindness, goodness, patience, self-control, faithfulness. Like I felt like I had like a spiritual ego, for the first time. I was like, wow.
I mean, that's pretty powerful. Do you think that was kind of like the first time in your life where you kind of like opened yourself up to that?
Yeah, it was the first time I fasted, and you can't help but to be open when you're fasting because, it changes your brain and your physiology.
Yeah, that's so true. So we got this new religion and, kind of a whole, sounds like a different orientation of life. And, what age were you at about this time? Were you like 23, 24?
Yeah, 22, between 21 and 23. I got married at 23. Colleen was 22. So we were still behind. So 23, 24. Yeah.
Then you also mentioned family. Like, when did you have your first kid?
Shortly after our marriage, about a year after our marriage.
So 25.
We, yeah, I guess 24, 25. Yeah, somewhere around there.
What was that
So
like?
yeah, that was my first child, my daughter Isabel. And we were living in my father-in-law's basement. I had just lost $10,000 that I had saved up for a mortgage because while Colleen was pregnant, I became a personal trainer. We were living back home. And I worked for a guy named John DeFlorio in Long Island. And he was a Czech practitioner for Paul Chek. He was a Paul Chek student. And he started introducing me to all kinds of things I never heard before: corrective exercise, structural integrity, core strength, and holistic living, nutrition and lifestyle stuff. Like it cracked me open to holistic living. And so I discovered Dr. Mercola around that time. And Dr. Mercola was all about alternative medicine. And so I started learning about, check this out, because people now like, I was learning about vaccines. This is, 2002, I'm learning about vaccines and how vaccines are bad. Nobody questions vaccines. Nobody questioned them back then. Everybody was taking, it was not even a question. And I'm telling my wife, I'm like, we're not vaccinating our kids. Now people like, you're a badass if you didn't get the COVID, but it's like, you don't get it, bro. You've been taking these all your whole life. So I'm bragging a little bit because it was like I was ahead of my time. I learned about home birthing. So I was like, hey, we're gonna have the baby at home. I learned about natural parenting, attachment parenting, organic food, feeding, how to feed babies so they have bigger brains. Like I was going way down that rabbit hole. Homeschooling, like all these things that like now people are kind of, it's taken them 20 years. But like back then, because of Paul Chek and because of Dr. Mercola and because, I was in this industry, I was learning about all these things. So it shaped how we did pregnancy and birth and parenting. So as a result, as I was learning that stuff, or even beforehand, or when maybe we didn't know she was pregnant yet, we were planning on buying a house near my parents. And I put a down payment on this house. But when I learned about all these things and I realized Colleen's going to have to go back to work like 3 months after having the baby, she was a school teacher. We decided it was like, nope, we're not, I'd rather us have no money than you stay home with the children right? And my parents thought that was crazy, or everybody thought that was crazy. But she's my ride or die girl. So she's like, "Yep, I'll take care of the kids, and whatever money you're making, we'll live off of." So we lived in my father-in-law's basement off of my few little dollars I was making as a personal trainer. Like I said, lost all our money. She quit her job, and I got really sick one winter. So anyway, the summer before that, my parents moved to Florida. So we're living in my father-in-law's basement. We're broke. I'm underemployed and not really loving my job. Father-in-law's basement. I'm so grateful for him that he let us live there, but it was like he was kind of a sloppy guy. So it was like dirty and like cat poop, and I didn't want to raise our child there. And so yeah, I got really sick and I was depressed. And there were also good things happening at that time too. I got really sick and depressed, and I discovered active meditation. I started reading Osho books. My brother introduced me to. I discovered active meditation. I started doing that. And I had a friend from my best friend from college started making money on the internet. About a year or two beforehand, I remember going over to his house one day and he showed me his PayPal account. He had made $40,000. I was like, how did you do that? He's like, yeah, I sell betting tips on AOL chat rooms. So I had it in my mind. I was like, I'm going to make money with the internet one day. I was like, that is the coolest thing. He just sits in his bedroom and he makes money with the internet. And the internet was brand new. I didn't even have an email address. Did not have an email address. So I remember sitting in my father's basement and I learned code and I built my first website and I was trying to sell like natural products. So I was there, it was a tough time, but it was also like it opened me up to a lot of the things that unfolded later on in my life when I finally moved down to Florida, which, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself.
So 24, 25. I mean, when you were in graduate school, you were going for exercise and physiology, correct?
Hmm.
Okay. And then after that, you said graduate school didn't work out, and then after that, you kind of dive into some more exercise, physiology, nutrition. I mean, the whole works of like homeschooling and home birthing, like kind of figuring out how to become reliant or like self-reliant, like figuring out how do we become fully reliant as a household, as a family. It sounds like. Um, but what do you think it was about the exercise and the nutrition aspects that you were really interested in?
Corrective exercise blew my mind because it showed how, like, I learned from Paul Chek, like, really functional anatomy and physiology, how the body actually works and movement and how to correct people's posture and their muscular imbalances and like structural integrity and like it was a far cry from the football workouts I was doing. These were specialized exercises and he was using big words and like teaching me anatomy and like so like I was able to like I became a good student. I was smart. I learned all these things. I was watching all these VHS tapes and taking all the certifications and so yeah, I was fully invested in that. And then of course they go hand in hand with holistic living and nutrition. So yeah, I made that my lifestyle.
Why was that stuff like something that stuck out to you, like, with the mobility training and just understanding the anatomy and how things are working together in your body? Like, were you struggling with like uh, back pain or things like that, or like postural issues, and like you wanted to learn these things so that you could overcome them yourself, or was it just something you were very curious about?
No, I was a trainer, so I was helping other people. I didn't have any problems, but like I got clients that needed help.
So you were pretty passionate about helping your clients.
Oh yeah. I worked for this guy, John, like I said, and we developed very comprehensive. training programs and nutrition and lifestyle programs, and really helping our clients become vibrant and vital.
Is there any clients that kind of stick out to you, like in terms of transformational stories that early on?
No, where we were living was, or where we were working was where it was a very affluent part of Long Island. So affluent people pay for the best of services that they don't need as much as poor people. Do you know what I'm saying? In other words, it's like these were high level, these were people that were already in great shape, that were already super healthy. And so, but they could afford his services. So we were just, there were a lot of like just moms, who had like wealthy husbands, and they'd come in and we'd, do our magic with them. But it wasn't like taking obese people or really sick people. It was like affluent people who are usually pretty healthy.
What's like an example of like something you would do? Like what problems did you help people with? I
So
mean, yeah.
assessments, it was like 90% of what we did, right? If you're not assessing, you're guessing. So when we started, so I worked for him for a while. I moved around. I worked for another guy for athletes, and then John opened up his athlete gym. So I came back, and most of what we did in terms of effective corrective stuff was helping injured athletes, or athletes that were injury prone, or athletes that had muscular imbalances that diminished their performance ability. A lot of hockey players, mostly high school players, high school athletes, and stuff like that. So I don't know. I couldn't say that there were any like miraculous turnarounds, but we were doing really good work.
It's super cool. And then did your parents divorce? You said your dad went to Florida, but you didn't mention your mom.
No, my parents went to Florida, both of them. No, my parents didn't divorce.
Gotcha.
Um, yeah, my dad quit his job impulsively one day. He was just like, had enough with these people. So he comes home and he tells my mom, we're moving. So he starts packing everything up to sell the house, and he moves to Florida. My dad does what he wants to do. So we were all kind of like left high and dry, like, okay. So we just had our baby, and my parents, who were like, the bedrock, they left. So yeah.
So were you living with your parents at the time that they decided to move?
No, I ended up living with my father-in-law because we knew they were, by that point, we knew they were leaving. They were like packing up
Oh,
for months. So it was like, well, we can't stay here because they're going to be gone. So we lived at my father-in-law's house.
gotcha. Okay. And so this is kind of where you're getting your intro into like the strength and physiology side of things. Like before that, you were pretty focused on football and sports, and now you're kind of diving into something similar. You're pretty focused on athletics, but it's more so oriented around this spirituality, this meditative practice, and really kind of focusing on the internal side of things in regards to the body.
Hmm.
Um, and so, when did you move to Florida?
Well, shortly after my daughter was born. She was born in August of, I want to say 2003, and 2004, January. Basically, we came down for Christmas in December. I went back to New York, packed our stuff up, and drove down, and we were there
What
January the
uh,
next.
what made you pull the trigger on that?
Oh, it was no. First of all, if you're in New York in the winter and there's snowstorms, and you visit Florida, you don't want to go back to New York. That's first of all. And second of all, I didn't have any more. I didn't have any opportunities. I was running into dead ends in New York. I had lost a job. I didn't. I was exploring different professions. I was still trying to build my online business. If I stayed in New York, I probably would have built that website, and that would have been. I already had like stockpiled products and stuff, but that was still a ways off before I could figure out how to make that work. So I really didn't have anything going for me in New York, and it would just be better. My wife preferred to be near my parents with the baby, so it was just kind of a no-brainer, and we just packed up and lived in a spare bedroom at my parents' house for a few months.
Who was this friend that introduced you to the online world? The guy that you said had the PayPal account with $40,000 in it. Like, who was that?
Richie Rich. He was the only other freshman college football player like me that dominated all the tests. So like he and I were like the top. We were the best players on the team. So we met each other very early because so when you were doing the trials in the beginning of the season, you have to keep doing certain tests until you pass them. Well, he and I were like the only freshmen that passed the first time, so we like went to lunch together, and from there we were just. His parents are West Indian, also. They're Trinidadian, so we ate a lot of the same foods. We had a lot of the same jokes. We understood had the same kind of culture, so we became good friends right away.
And you said he was giving bed tips on AOL?
Betting tips.
What does that mean?
So if you're a gambler, you gamble on games.
Oh, betting.
So yeah, betting tips. So it's like,
Gotcha.
the Bulls are playing the Celtics, like who's gonna win? Well, he would like do a little research and he would sell his tips. And the more wins you have, the more people are like, oh, you got to get your tips from this guy. So he had like he became very good at betting tips.
I thought you said betting tips, like BEDDING, like teaching people like how to make their bed or something like that. But betting
Oh,
tips makes a
oh.
lot more
The internet
sense.
wasn't that niche yet. The internet was pretty much like a degenerate wild wild west. It was like porn and gambling.
Yeah. So, and then before we move on, because I want to learn more about Isabel and kind of your experience around that and your home birthing experience. What was your diet like in college and kind of into 24, 25 ish range?
Well, about this time, I discovered I was gluten intolerant, and so I had lost a lot of weight from fasting, and then I stopped. I started essentially doing low carb keto before it was like a cool thing. So, and it was only because I discovered I was gluten intolerant. And I think I became gluten intolerant a few years earlier when I was in graduate school when I took a heavy dose of antibiotics that screwed up my gut. And I started getting like really bad gas and horrible farts whenever I ate wheat. Yeah, it was, man, I have horror stories. So, but John, being, a holistic practitioner and the things that we were learning, he said you should maybe cut out gluten. I'm like, what is gluten? This was before it was even a thing, man. I was like, what is gluten? And he's like, remember this acronym: browse, barley, rye, oats, wheat, and spelt. I'm like, wheat? I was like, wheat is in everything. He's like, yeah, pretty much, so you got to cut that out of your diet. And it helped. So I had abs for the first time in my life, and I ate a lot of organic meat and vegetables. That was my diet.
I know you also mentioned that you absorbed some of your like respiratory issues from your mom. Like, were you still having allergies throughout your college career and into your early 20s?
No, I never had allergies like that, but bad breathing habits from my mother, like holding my breath, shallow breathing, especially when I'm stressed out or angry. So they were more like habits.
Got it. Okay. So going a little bit forward, Isabel, and I know you mentioned home birthing. Did you guys do a home birth?
Three out of our four children we home birth, but Isabel, my wife, was just not ready yet. And plus we were in our father-in-law's basement, and she just wasn't. She was like, "This is gross. I don't want to do it here." And so we had her in the hospital. Isabel was the only one that we had in the hospital. And by the time we had Emerson, we were already in Florida. Emerson, Simone, and Benjamin were all born at home.
So what was the hospital birth like for you? I mean, I imagine you were like learning about this home birthing stuff and you
Hmm.
might have been a pretty strong proponent of it, and then you kind of go into the hospital and have this experience. So, what was that like?
We were adamant about certain things, and it was because back then it was much weirder. They didn't understand what we were doing. So we were adamant that she needed to breastfeed. We were adamant that they were to give the baby no shots, no medicine, don't smear any crap on her eyes, and you need to give her back to us as quickly as possible. Because what they do is they traumatize the children. They take them away from, and it traumatizes the mother. They separate them for hours after the birth. Like, who does that? You don't even do that to a dog. Like, I might have a friend that breeds dogs, and like you let the puppy stay with the mom because otherwise it's traumatizing. But this is what they do in our system. So yeah, I was like the helicopter dad, like running around making sure that they fulfilled all of our objectives. And we left like against doctor's orders. They're like, you need to stay here for like a week. And we're like, oh, we're going home.
So, how did they respond to that? Because I feel like I'd be the same way. Just like with being adamant about, hey, like I don't want you doing this stuff that you're regularly used to doing. And so, did they comply, and were they pretty with the program?
It was compromise. We got some of what we wanted. They got some of what they wanted. Like they kept her, my daughter, away from my wife under a freaking heating light. This is so dumb. But I stayed there the whole time. I was like, well, if you're gonna take her away, I'm staying. I stood there for like 3 hours next to my daughter, and they were like, "That's the guy." So they got some of what they want. I was watching to make sure that they didn't give her, it's poke her with things and you know the bad things that they like to do.
Man, that's pretty wild. Well, what was it like holding your daughter for the first time?
Weird, weird. I don't know, man. It's like otherworldly, but I wasn't emotional about it at all. Like, and I'm not making fun of anybody, but like there are a lot of men who their wife gives a baby and they're like melting all over the place, and they're like, "Oh, my life changed when I held that baby," and it was like, oh, they cry, and it's like I didn't have any of that. I just had like, okay. Well, now there's three of us. So, gonna make how are we gonna make this work? I just felt a sense of responsibility more than anything. I was like, how can I create an environment and raise this child to be good, to be great? That was really that's what my mindset was. I'm a narcissist, so I'm like, my child's gonna be the best, and I'm gonna do everything I can to make sure. So I was doing all the alternative things, right? Anything that was alternative and weird, I was like a zealot for, and my wife would follow along with me.
So yeah, because you were into a lot of this counterintuitive stuff that was perceived as counterintuitive, like in the
Right.
world at that time. So like, what did the days following look like after you get Isabel home, and how did that adjustment go for you guys?
So yeah, we get Isabel home, and I'm cooking. I'm making food for my wife, and so that she could have the best nutrition in her body to breastfeed our baby. It was the first child she ever had, so she breastfed. She did a great job. Breastfeeding was like not in vogue back then, but my wife is pretty courageous, so she's just like she's breastfeeding our kid in public. She just does not care. Um, Discreetly, but not like abashedly or ashamed. Um, we would baby wear, so the baby was always held either in a sling or something. We co-slept, so the baby was sleeping in the bed with us next to Colleen, so she could feed her at night. Um, yeah, I mean, we were doing all those things,
What
changing
kind of meals were
diapers.
you making?
I was making what I would eat, a lot of beef, a lot of butter, a lot of fish oil, right? Cod liver oil made a comeback, coconut oils, carrots and vegetables and that kind of stuff.
So did you put a lot of your like budgeting towards investing in healthy food?
All of it. That was the number one thing in my mind. Yeah, all organic food. I couldn't even afford it. I couldn't afford anything, but I was like, "Where's it? What we're gonna? This is what we're gonna eat." Because I was a zealot about health.
Yeah, because that's super counterintuitive. I mean, usually you got people who, they want to make their investment into cars or material things. Like, what made you decide to put all of your money or the vast majority of your money towards health?
Because I knew it was the most important thing. What's more important than your health, right? What you eat is what you become. I had one friend that said it like this. He says, two things you never lack to invest in: education and food, because they both become who you are. I was like, yeah, that's right. It's becoming who we are. So your car's not going to make me who I am. Clothing's not going to make me who I am. Food, it literally becomes the cells in my body.
That's right. And how did sleeping with the baby go? Like having her in bed with you guys?
It was fine. It was great. Um, we followed attachment theory, which comes from Dr. Sears and a lot of the work of Daniel Siegel, the developmental mind, uh, prefrontal cortex, mirror neuron stuff. So I was learning about that. And so we followed that philosophy. And with the first child, it was doable but challenging because she was very needy, and I think we fed into that neediness, and it exhausted Colleen. So by the second and third, luckily the second daughter wasn't so needy. She actually wanted to be put down, where Isabel never wanted to be put down. Emerson was like kind of the kind of baby who was like, "Leave me alone, just put me down, like stop holding me." So it was perfect for Isabel, but short lived.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be weird just having this little human in bed with you.
Hmm. Well, she was on the side with her mother, so I didn't know any different. Colleen had the baby there, and she would nurse her while she's sleeping, and they were very quiet, and it was very nice. I never had to wake up because I had to go to work in the morning, so it wasn't like I gotta go wake up and like put bottles in the microwave or any dumb stuff like that. I was like, the baby's right there. As soon as she starts fussing, she's got a boob in her mouth.
What were you doing for work at this time?
Uh, Personal training, strength and conditioning. I think I was working up in Scarsdale at the time at another strength and conditioning gym. I was working for a guy named Vinny.
What was that? Like you said, you're working in a gym now.
It was like a rehab center that trained athletes. So it was another wealthy part of New York, upstate, Scarsdale. And yeah, it was high school kids that come home from Scarsdale High School, and we would train them: football players, basketball players, soccer players, boys, girls, mostly high school.
Then was it just you and Vinny, or was there other coworkers that you guys had?
No, it was like there were like four or five of us. Me, Vinny, Andy. There was this girl, I forget her name, and Pete.
Do any of them kind of like stick out to you? Like, were any of them like notable characters in your life?
Uh, I remember them. Pete sticks out the most because I communicate with him now. Like we're still in touch. But no, I mean, they were good guys. I liked working for them. It was a cool place to work. But yeah, it was a job.
Are you pretty passionate about it still, or?
Yeah, I liked it. Sure.
But you was that kind of like internet money kind of looming in the back of your mind still? Like you still had bigger aspirations for that?
No. I started the website and internet stuff after I was working with Vinny. That was when I went back to working with John, but then after I was working with John, I got I he got hired and I was hired to work for him. So it wasn't his business and they had to downsize, so I got fired. And it was during that time, like when I knew that it was coming to an end, that I started building websites and moving in that direction.
So we had some technical issues. Elliot lagged out on his end. He's not able to rejoin. And so we only got to about age 25. I don't know about you guys, but I'm really enjoying learning about Elliot's story and excited to hopefully pick it up where we left off in a part 2. So if you're all the way to the end here and you're looking forward to learning more about Elliot, make sure to watch out for part 2 of Elliot's life story. And that being said, it's time to end. So we'll see you guys on the next episode.